It is often the case that we have some quantity given as like an ordinary number, or especially as a fraction, that we would like to express as a percent. So let's say, for example, let's say we want to express 228 out of 1900 as a percent. What I'm asking is 228 out of 1900 is how many out of 100? That's just what the question is. 228 out of 1900 is how many out of 100? Well, if that's what the question is, a proportion is clearly the way to answer it. And always, since we're trying to find a percent, the percent will be an unknown. So we'll have x times 1900 is 228 times 100. X times 1900 is 22800. So we want to know what is it that when we multiply it by 1900, we get 22800. I'm not going to say that way. 22,800. Better. So what we want to know is, what is 22,800 divided by 1900? Using what we know of decimal division, we make this a little bit easier for ourselves. And we're going to actually divide 19 into 228. 19 goes into 22 once. Borrowing 12 minus 9 is 3. 19 goes into 38, maybe twice. 2 times 9 is 18. 2 times 1 is 2, and 1 is 3. Oh, exactly twice. Nothing left. My unknown number is 12. Where did that come from? 228 out of 1900 is 12%. All right, I'm going to give you one of these to try where you start with a fraction, because those are the easy ones to express as a percent, because there's this obvious proportion. Express 42 out of 500 as a percent. Pause the video and try this now. Okay, so what we want to know is 42 out of 500 is the same as how many out of every 100? Cross multiplying. 42 times 100 is 4200, and that should equal 500 times x. X is the number that when we multiply it by 500, we get 4200. So x had better be 4200 divided by 500. Using what we know of decimal division to make this a little bit easier, we're going to divide 5 into 42. 5 goes into 4, not at all. It goes into 42 8 times, because 8 times 5 is 40. There's still something left. I could use a fraction, but I'm in a decimal sort of mood. So I'm going to add a 0.0. Bring down the 0. 5 goes into 24 times. Nothing left. So x is 8.4. If I'd wanted to give a fraction, I would have stopped here, and I would have said 8 2/5. 42 out of 500 we could express as 8.4% or 8 2/5%. We could give whichever answer made us happier, unless the instructions told us which one we want, or something about the situation told us which one we want. Okay, what if we're in a less nice situation? What if we have, say, a mixed number, or a whole number, or a decimal? Let's say we want to express 0.7 as a percent. Now, I could write this decimal in fraction notation and get a fraction that way, but I'm not in the mood for that. I want to keep with decimal notation for this problem. That way would be a correct way, but let's see what happens if we just stick with decimal notation. This is the move we're going to make. We really want to use that proportion. So our move, we're going to just write this number we have over 1. What does that look like? We'll have 0.7 over 1 is something over 100. Right, cross multiply. Writing this over 1 makes us happy, right? Because we'll have 1 times x is x. Is 0.7 times 100, which is just, well, we're getting rid of 2 zeros in the denominator. So we want 2 fewer digits after the decimal point. Right now I have 1. Oh, I need to add a 0 in if I'm going to move the decimal point 2 places to the right, right? This is really the same as, right, I can add as many trailing zeros as I want after the decimal point. If I write it like this, I've got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 digits after the decimal point. If I only want to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I need my decimal point here. All right. So my x is 70. What does that tell me? 0.7 is 70%. In general, if we're just writing our number over 1, this suggests a shortcut again. Right, since this is always going to be x times 1, x is just whatever our number was times 100. If we combine that with the shortcut for multiplying a decimal by 100, we get a super shortcut. If we want to write a decimal as a percent, we can just move the decimal point 2 places to the right. So if we want to write 2.735 as a percent, we can go through the whole process, if only having one procedure is easiest. Then we cross multiply, and we get that we're multiplying our decimal by 100. So we could have skipped writing the proportion and just written this down, if we remembered the shortcut. And then to multiply this decimal by 100, we want 2 fewer digits to the right of the decimal point. We want 1 instead of 3. So our x is 273.5. We moved the decimal point 2 places to the right, if we remembered the super shortcut. And that gives us 2.735 equals 275.3%. Remember, this is a percent, this isn't, this gets a percent sign, this doesn't. Probably the weirdest thing that can happen in this situation is that someone, probably a math teacher, gives us a mixed number to write as a percent. We handle this the same way, but it looks weird, so I'm going to show you an example. Let's suppose we want to write 3 1/3 as a percent. And I'm going to put in an extra rule. The percent you give should be a whole number or a mixed number. All right, what's this going to look like? Well, I still want to use my proportion. I'm going to say, well, this is just some sort of number. I'm going to say my some sort of number over 1 is x over 100. Cross multiplying, I'm going to get that my x is 3 1/3 times 100. In order to actually do this multiplication, I'm going to need to write my 3 1/3 as an improper fraction. And I'm going to need to write my 100 as 100 wholes. 3 1/3 is how many thirds? Well, 3 times 3 is 9, plus another 1 is 10. Well, this multiplication's pretty easy, at least. 10 times 100 is a 1 followed by 3 zeros, 1,000. So my x is 1,000 thirds. But the instructions say I should write it as a whole or a mixed number. So I'm going to make that 1,000 thirds into a whole number or a mixed number by dividing 3 into 1,000. 3 goes into 10 3 times. Yes, I can see that the 3's are going to repeat, but I want to make sure I have the same number of 3's. So I'm going to go through this kind of carefully. Okay, so I have 333, and what's left? 1. So my 1,000 thirds is 333 whole things and 1/3 left over. That tells me that 3 1/3 is 333 and 1/3%. All right, fair enough. I'm going to give you one of these to try as well. Write 5 1/8 as a percent. Answer as a whole or mixed number in lowest terms. Pause the video and try this now. All right, so I've got my 1 5/8 over 1 is something out of 100. If you remember the shortcut, you can skip this step. What's the shortcut? This is always going to be 1 times x. So I'm going to get x is 1 5/8 times 100. In order to actually do this multiplication, what do I need? I need to write this guy as an improper fraction, and I need to write 100 as 100 wholes. 1 5/8, I'll have 8 times 1 is 8 eighths, plus the 5/8 I started with. 8 plus 5 is 13. So 1,300 out of 8. I want to write this as a mixed number, so I'm going to divide 8 into 1,300. 8 goes into 13 once. 8 goes into 50 6 times. 8 goes into 20 twice. And now I want to give my answer as a mixed number, so I'm going to stop dividing. I'm going to have 162 and 4/8. I'm going to simplify 4/8 off to the side. 4/8 is 4 times 1 over 4 times 2. So it's a half. So I get 162 and a half. 1 5/8 is 162 and a half %.